When people think about PS2 and its platformers, the same names always prop up. Everyone remembers Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Sly Cooper. They were the definitive mascots of their time, plastered across every magazine cover and demo disc. But lurking in the more shadowy corners of the console's library are platformers that never really made it big. We're talking about games that were either too weird, too experimental, or simply too unlucky to become mainstream successes. Digging into this can be quite the fascinating gamble. You're never sure if you'll find a hidden gem, a broken mess, or something that defies all logic and common sense. So, let's check out the PS2's weirdest platformers to see what unexpected masterpieces we can find. When you fire up Hurdy-Gurdy, the first thing you'll notice is how gorgeous it looks for its time. The landscapes are broad, painterly hills that look straight out of a fairy tale, and there is this dreamlike atmosphere that makes you feel, at least at first, that you're going to experience something truly magical. But then the game actually starts, and you realize this is a glorified separate simulator. There is platforming technically, but it isn't so much leaping across dangerous lava pits as it is chasing after herds of really weird looking animals that behave with the logic of toddlers with an extreme sugar rush. One species panics and scatters the second you approach, another likes to pick fights with everything in sight. Another needs coaxing like my damn cat, who refuses to move off the couch and keeps clawing my face. And because the levels are massive and fairly open, you're not just solving puzzles or platforming challenges. Most of the time, you're trying to figure out how to funnel these creatures into pens, while cursing the game's camera angles and clumsy controls. It can be both satisfying and infuriating. The joy comes from those moments when it all clicks, when you finally manage to guide a bunch of critters across a bridge without anyone dying an untimely death. But the rage sets in when the AI suddenly decides to act like a deer, running directly into traffic. In the end, it's like 3D Lemmings, but with bizarre looking sheep that fidget and glitch through walls if you're not careful. However, when it works, it can be a relaxing and unique experience. Then there's Mr. Mosquito, which takes the crown for the worst villain player character in history. On paper, it doesn't even sound like a real game. You play as a mosquito invading the home of the Yamada family, and your mission is to suck young blood without being noticed. In practice, it's strangely tense and addictive. The entire game is a series of stealth puzzle missions where you zoom around a Japanese house waiting for the right moment to land and, do your thing. Once you latch on, you don't watch a cutscene, you have to rotate the analog stick in a consistent fashion to keep the blood flowing while staying undetected. Fail the QuickTime event and the human starts twitching, then swatting, then full-on flailing like they're in the Fist of the North Star or something. Each family member has their own routines. Dad sits in front of a TV, mom does yoga or takes a bath, the daughter does her stretches in her room. The combination of the mundane everyday life and the intensity of the actions really sells the absurdity of it all. You're essentially breaking into someone's quiet evening for a heist, except the loot is not money, it's bodily fluids. That sounded really wrong, I'm sorry. The game even has these so-called relax points, areas of the body you can jab to calm your targets down if they're after you, which is both interesting and kinda sus. It's not a long game and the gameplay can be repetitive, but it's one of those experiences you'll never forget because no one else ever dared to make something like it again. Well, probably for good reason, no one likes mosquitoes anyway, who the hell wants to play as one? Whiplash is a game that answers the age-old question, what if slapstick cartoons were in a platformer and the main mechanic was literally using someone as a flail? Oh, no one ever asked that? Well, too bad. You control Spanx the Weasel with Redmond the Rabbit permanently shackled to him, and together they escape from a lab where they were test subjects. The chain between them is a prison, a weapon, and a gadget, and the game makes use of every possible joke and mechanic out of that idea. You can use Redmond like a flail to attack enemies, slam him into glass to break it, or swing him around like a grappling hook. The humor is very Looney Tunes, which I love. Guards sleep on banana peels, equipment explodes with satisfying sound effects, and the animations are cartoony and exaggerated. What makes the game stand out is the different ways the chain gets utilized. Most platformers have you jumping, swinging, or shooting, but Whiplash has you experimenting constantly with your various skills, trying to figure out how to weaponize your unwilling bunny partner. It's not perfect though, of course. The levels can feel repetitive, and the camera sometimes struggles to keep up with the action, but it's a game with an exceptional sense of humor. Plus, the satire of a big, evil corporation mistreating animals feels oddly ahead of its time. It's like if Pira made a game that was actually good. An impossible task, I know. Now, Tak and the power of Juju, God I love this word, is odd in a different way. It's not as strange as a mosquito simulator or using a bunny as a medieval weapon, but it's one of those, wait, why isn't this popular cases? Tak is a shaman's apprentice living in the jungle, and the game is all about using magic, interacting with various animals, and solving puzzles rather than just beating things up. You got your typical collectibles, but you also unlock powers by appealing to the Jujus, quirky spirits that always have something stupid to say. The world design is colorful and it can be really inventive at times. You can ride animals to solve puzzles, use plants to bounce around, or trick monkeys into doing your dirty work. The humor, however, is very early 2000s Nickelodeon, which means a lot of gags and goofy moments that only little kids would appreciate. Still, the game had a charm that was enough to spawn sequels and even a Nickelodeon cartoon, which, while it was a massive failure, is more than most obscure PlayStation 2 platformers can claim. Playing it today feels like entering a Saturday morning cartoon that has a certain bizarre charm you can't help but appreciate. And finally there's Stretch Panic, and oh boy, how do I even describe this? You play as Linda, a girl with a magical scarf that can grab, stretch, and yank pretty much anything. Sounds neat, right? Well, here's the weird part. Most of the enemies you fight are overinflated, balloon-like women with gigantic bazongas that you grab and pop with your scarf. Yeah, how do I even continue this after that bombshell? Anyway, under the game's strange nature, there is actually a very innovative combat and puzzle system. The scarf is a one-size-fits-all tool, pun sorta intended. You can grab the floor and fling yourself upward like a human slingshot, yank projectiles out of the air, or stretch enemies to reveal their weak spots. The game is mostly a boss rush of sorts, each one a puzzle that requires you to experiment with the scarf in creative ways. Some fights are great to play, others are just frustrating, but overall you feel like you're playing something completely unique. Treasure, the developer, was known for making brilliant but eccentric games, and this one definitely leans hard on the eccentric to say the least. It's not polished and it's definitely not for everyone, but it's unforgettable in the way only the PS2 era could produce. Equal parts ingenious and insane Gunner bait. What makes revisiting all of these odd little gems so interesting is that together they showcase the PS2's library of secrets, one that sits just outside the glossy cover of the official PlayStation 2 magazine. The big three were sleek, polished, and frankly pretty predictable. These, on the other hand, were messy, weird, and experimental. They remind you of the risks developers used to take when budgets were in the small nation's capital and creativity hadn't yet been focus tested into oblivion. Whether you're herding strange-looking sheep across an ethereal countryside, committing blood theft auto in a suburban living room, using a rabbit against corporate goons, passing the joint around with jackal spirits, or using a sentient scarf to act upon your deepest sexual fantasies, each of these games shows off a different flavor of imagination that doesn't really exist anymore. They weren't perfect, in fact they were often deeply flawed, but they were extremely memorable. And sometimes that's all that matters, because in a way, their strange ideas, mechanics, and overall dreamlike atmosphere are what makes them timeless. They are reminders that video games should occasionally be strange, silly, and just a little bit unhinged. Just a little bit though, otherwise we're just reaching itch.io levels of sexual deviancy. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stuff. You know how it goes. Have a great day, and until next time, take care and have fun.